Hello everyone, welcome back to another session by K21 Academy. Today our expert trainer will be discussing some different types of questions that could be asked in your AWS Solution Architect examination. So let's get into the video.
So there is the first question on your screen. A customer relationship management application runs on an EC2 instances in multiple availability zone behind the application load balancer. If one of the instances fail, what will occur? The options are these. Load balancer never does a fleet management, guys. Whatever words I'm using today, they are very important keywords. So load balancer is not doing fleet management. When it is the fleet management service involved, at that time only your failed instances will be replaced by the healthy ones automatically. When it is a load balancer, the failed instance, if the desired quantity is 3 in an autoscaler, it will remain 3. If one system crashes down, another will be launched. Fleet management will happen there, but it won't happen in the load balancer. In load balancer, how does it goes? That if a health check on a instance fails, then the load balancer will stop sending the request to the failed instance. But it will keep checking the instance. As soon as it comes up, it will give you, the request will start flowing to the load balancer. So the answer is A. Let's move on to another question. Next question. So when we have to create a decoupled architecture, SQS is a part of that. SWF is also part of that. So, but then this question, a company needs to perform a asynchronous processing and has Amazon SQS as a part of a decoupled architecture. Company wants to ensure that the number of empty responses on the polling request is kept minimum. What should be a solution? What should a solution architect do to ensure the empty responses are reduced? So when a message is taken up by one server for processing, it won't be visible to the other servers in the cluster. So the answer is D, guys. Okay, the answer is D. Of course, you have to increase the time, but it is not the visibility timeout. It is the receive message wait time for the queue. Because when you increase the receive message wait time seconds property of the queue, it is set to a greater value, that is anything greater than 0, the long polling comes into effect. So this is the question number 2 that we have seen. Another question on your screen. A company currently stored data in on-premise application on local drives. The chief technology officer wants to reduce the hardware cost by storing the data in S3, but does not want to make modification to the application. To minimize the latency, frequently accessed data should be available locally. What is the reliable and durable solution for a solution architect to implement that will reduce the cost of the local storage? So you have got these 4 options on your screen. So the answer is the volume gateway. We have discussed about the different type of gateways when it is a storage gateway, right? The tape gateway, the volume gateway. We have discussed the file gateway. So we have discussed about all the various kinds of storage gateway options. So in AWS storage gateway, volume gateway connects to an on-premise application, on-premise software application with cloud-backed storage volumes that can be mounted as internet small computing system, 𝐬𝒔𝒐 systems. The reading of this particular is pronounced as 𝐬𝒔𝒐. So it can be mounted as 𝐬𝒔𝒐 devices or from an on-premise application server. The cached part of the volume is made available to the servers locally, and then rest of the data is copied into S3. Okay. So that is an answer. Do some practice to the question and don't try to mug up the answers. There are a lot of questions available on the internet, which were once real exam questions. So don't try to mug up the answers which are available on the sites. Try to understand why B. B is the answer, it's fine. But why B? Why not C? Why not D? Okay. So you have to understand that. Next question. A company runs a public facing 3-tier web application in VPC. So here see at the end, it is select 2. So it is a multiple choice question that has to be there. A company runs a public facing 3-tier web application in VPC across multiple availability zones. The Amazon EC2 instances for the application tier running in private subnets needs to download the software patches from the internet. The instances cannot be directly accessible from the internet. So from this we understand that it is something NAT gateway to come into the picture. Okay. Yes, the NAT gateway or the NAT instance. The first statement tells me that what actions should be taken to allow the instances to download the patches. The similar example I have quoted when we were studying the practicals for the lab sessions for NAT gateway, right? The similar kind of question and or the scenario I have given you. Now you have got these 5 options to select from. So NAT gateway, configuring a NAT gateway is required. See, there are 2 NAT gateways. Configure a NAT gateway in public subnet, configure a NAT gateway in private subnet. There is no point of keeping a NAT gateway in private subnet because the NAT gateway is the one which will help the private machines to get routed to the internet. So it has to be in the public subnet. Okay. And then define a custom rule in the routing table of the private routing table to route the traffic to the NAT gateway which is intended for the internet. So this is the answer A and B. C cannot be the answer because the application instances that we are creating are not required to have the public IP address. They are not required to have the public IP address. That was a requirement that they should not have public IP address, and at the same time they should get an internet connectivity. NAT instance could have been the answer, but if it was into the public subnet. So this is how you have to evaluate. You could have taken the NAT instance also, but then why? Because this is not the answer. Why? Because it is lying in the private subnet. It should have been into the public subnet. Then it could have been a right answer to you. Okay. So the answer is A and B. The NAT gateway forwards the traffic from the instances in the private subnet to the internet or other AWS services and then sends the response back to the instances. After the NAT gateway is created, the route tables for the private subnet must be updated to point the internet traffic to the NAT gateway. See, one thing is written over here. I would like to explain it. And other services. What does it mean by this? So I have a private machine. This is my private machine. There are 2 things. One is my internet servers, maybe Yahoo or whatever the servers you want to use. So this particular server that I am having in my private subnet, if it wants to use the S3 service, you know what is the sequence of going to the S3 service? This private subnet this private machine will go to internet and then it will go to the S3 bucket. Because the S3 bucket is accessible via a DNS name. My bucket is always a name compliant to the DNS. The bucket names are compliant to DNS names. This is how we reach to the S3 buckets. If we want to reduce this path, my S3 service and my servers, they both are in Amazon infrastructure only. Then why do I have to go via internet? That is the default structure which Amazon was following. But then we have got endpoint solutions, creation of endpoints, which is not the part of the syllabus, but then endpoint solutions are there via which we can create a direct connectivity of the private machine to the S3 buckets. So that's why it is said that the machines in the private subnets need to forward the traffic to the internet or to other AWS services. It has to go to the NAT gateway. So probably sometimes you may get a question that what will be the path the private machine will follow if it wants to reach to the S3. So you should be aware, because endpoints are not included. We have not implemented the endpoint solution into it. So then in that particular case, it will be reached via the internet. Okay. Next question. So a solution architect wants to design a solution to save cost on EC2 instances that do not run during the 2-week company shutdown. The application running on the instance store, the data in the instance memory RAM must be present. I have told you that if you shut down the machine, the instance store memory will be wiped out. Okay. If you are using a instance store kind of memory, the application running in the instance store, the data in the instance store memory RAM must be present when the instance resumes. What approach should a solution architect recommend if they want to save the cost? What approach they should recommend? You need to hibernate the machine if you want to preserve the data which is there in the RAM of the machine. Hibernating an instance saves the content on the RAM to the EBS root volume. If you hibernate, whatever content is there on the RAM, it will go to EBS root volume, and when the system restart, the content of RAMs are reloaded. So see, the requirement, the first pillar says that you should understand the requirement of the customer and understand the workflow of the customer and give the solution according to that. Now, customer's workflow was saying that it is running a application instance store data that is in the RAM, and that must be present when the system resumes for the operation. You are not allowed to change the workflow. You are not allowed to modify the application, because if you modify the application to store the data in the volumes, obviously the latency will be increased. If a company is using instance store to put their data into it for accessing, that means it is a application where latency matters, time to retrieval of the information matters. That is the reason they are using an instance store memory. So you cannot suggest them to put the data in the volume itself. Actually, instance store memory is not available on all types of machines. You need to see the type of machine on which the instance store options are available. Okay, make sure that the kind, because this is like, as we have seen that with T2 micro we were not able to take the instance store, remember? So you have to make sure it's not the AMI, it is more importantly the type of machine. Fine, moving ahead. Next question. A company plans to run a monitoring application on EC2 instance in a VPC. The connections are made to the instance using its private IPv4 address. A solution architect needs to design a solution that will allow the traffic to quickly direct it to a standby instance if the application fails and becomes unreachable. Which approach will meet this requirement? Okay, actually there are only 4 options. A, B, C, D. E is part of the D thing only. D cannot be an option because it is an elastic IP address term which is being used in this D option. And here specifically it has been mentioned that the machines needs to communicate on the private IPv4 address. And an elastic IP is a public IP address. It is not a private IP address. In application, like someone is asking, why not option A? What does an application load balancer do? It gives the request in a round robin fashion or in a weighted round robin fashion. One request will go to server A, one request will go to server B. But here I do not want it in this way. I want all the requests to go on the primary server. If that goes down, then the request should go to the standby server. So application load balancer cannot be an option. I don't want to balance the load. I cannot do that kind of setting in application load balancer, that primary and secondary one. That is possible in Route 53. Such small tricks will be there in the questions. Okay, evaluate the question properly. Evaluate the question properly. So now this is next question. This is what you also have to explain yourself when you are in exam. This is something not related to the knowledge of CCNA. Nothing is there. An analytics company is planning to offer a site analytics service to its user. The service will require the user's web page include a JavaScript that makes authenticated GET requests to the company's Amazon S3 bucket. What must be a solution architect do to ensure that the script will successfully get executed? So if D, it is saying public execute privilege. How can you have a public execute privilege and in the question it is authenticated? So it is only authenticated user should be able to access. The answer is A. Everything which is written is not an option available, guys. Provide the user with a signed URL for the script. What do you mean by signed URL? So it is enable cross origin resource sharing on the S3 bucket. Okay. Next question. Company security team requires that all. Okay, one more hint, one more, or I can say one more tip I want to give you for exam. Don't read the options before you completely read the question. Because if you read the options before the question, you will pre-assume something in your mind. Okay, the question is the company security team requires that all data stored in the cloud to be encrypted at rest all the times using the encryption keys stored on premise. Which encryption option meets the requirement? When it is an encryption to be talked about, we have got an encryption, server side encryption, client side encryption, encryption happening via the AWS managed keys, encryption happening via the customer provided keys. These were few things that we have studied about. Okay. We have not studied about anything as such that use the lambda function to trigger the S3 bucket events to encrypt the data. We have not studied anything. Okay, we have not any studied any such thing. So obviously E cannot be the answer. Obviously E cannot be the answer because you cannot trigger a lambda function for creating an encryption. The process to encrypt the objects which are being uploaded in the bucket is via enabling the encryption. There is a tick that you want to encrypt the object, and it is specifically saying that it should be encrypted at rest all the time. So data encryption at rest is a feature provided to you by Amazon. And in that we have got two options available. Whether you want to get it encrypted via AWS managed keys or you want to get it encrypted via the customer managed keys. And here we are talking about customer managed keys. So the answer is C and D. E is not correct because the way to encrypt the data in the S3 buckets, there is a method to do that. And the method that we have seen in the practicals, that we have an option to check if we want to enable the encryption of the data on the bucket. There was no lambda function which we have to associate to enable that encryption to happen. Okay, we have no such option available. The lambda functions were there when you were selecting an events to be selected. From there was no such thing to be done if you want the encryption to get enabled on the bucket. You were getting an option to encrypt the data at rest for your buckets with an option to tick and select whether it has to be done via the customer managed keys or via the AWS managed keys. Okay.
So guys, this was our expert from Team K21 Academy, and if in case you missed upon any concept or if you want to dive deeper into the concepts, then we have something really special for you. We have our free class on Amazon AWS Solution Architect Certification for Beginners. Under this free class, you'll be learning about why and who should learn AWS, cloud services, deployment models, and AWS services as well. And the most important part is you'll be getting hands-on labs, job opportunities, along with Docker and Kubernetes in AWS, and amazing, amazing stuff. So if you want to register for this free class, All you have to do is just log on to your browser and type k21academy.com/AWSSA02. And after that, you'll be seeing this kind of interface. You just have to click on book your free seat now, select your event date, add your name, your email address, your phone number, and click on yes, save my seat. And after that, you'll be seeing this kind of page. You just have to save this link on the extreme right, add it to your calendars, and I'll see you in the free class. Till then, keep learning.